talent management and outreach for Army Futures Command here in Austin, Texas. And I also have the pleasure of moderating our conversation this afternoon with this esteemed panel. And I'd like to take a few minutes to acquaint you with the professionals that I am sharing the platform with today. Major General Maria Gervais has served as a soldier in the U.S. Army for 30 plus years. She's served in all types of units across our Army, deploying numerous times in support of our country, and has led at all levels to include serving as the Army's environmental commander, training environment cross-functional team director here for Army Futures Command, focused on improving the Army's ability to train. Welcome, Major General Gervais. Dr. Catherine Dale has a long history as a senior advisor to top military leaders from Iraq and Afghanistan to Europe to Army Futures Command here in Texas. She brings an outside perspective to questions on Army strategy, policy, and organization from her background as an academic political scientist, years in the United Nations peacekeeping, and years leading research efforts. Welcome, Dr. Dale. Dr. Kimberly Sablon is the lead for science and technology for Army Futures Command, again here in Austin. Dr. Sablon has an impressive and expansive fundamental science background that includes the development of novel technologies through strong collaborations with industry, academia that are both national and international, government partners, and she's led the Army programs in emerging sensing and energy technologies. She is currently developing investment strategies in S&T for the Army. Welcome, Dr. Sablon. So, interestingly, today our discussion this afternoon is new minds, new innovations. Innovating for change requires enduring purpose, relentless, and creative execution. And one of the most powerful ways that we can influence how quickly balance is achieved is by championing specific goals, either within our community, networks, organizations, or the groups that we belong to. So I'd be curious to hear from each of you on your perspectives on why the Army suddenly wants to innovate. And so we'll start with Major General Gervais.
Well, thank you, Amy, and thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to come discuss with us what we think is a very important initiative for the Army and why we need to change. So I'm actually going to rephrase that question, because she said, why does the Army suddenly want to innovate? Well, I will tell you that the Army absolutely must innovate, and here's why. Because, you know, if you take a look back in the last 20 to 30 years, historically, the Army has been, or Department of Defense, has been the leader within industry in lots of areas. Well, that's not the case any longer. You know, there is so much expertise in our commercial industry and academia in so many different areas that these experts have leaped ahead of what we are currently doing inside the Army. And so we must change in order to take advantage of this talent that exists within our country. But that's not the only reason why. If you really take a look at it too, you know, things like AI, space, also communications, and in my field, the virtual and gaming field, the technology has absolutely exploded. And because of our processes inside of the Army, our acquisition processes, our timelines, we can no longer keep up with that pace, rapid pace of technology advancement. And so we must change our processes inside the Army, and we also need to take a look at it for another reason. Because if we do not change, and if we, you know, and I said we must innovate. We must innovate because our adversaries are. Our adversaries are already advancing in so many different fronts. And what we can't afford inside the Army, and even, I would say, inside the Department of Defense, we can no longer enjoy the luxury of 10 to 15 to 18-year timelines to deliver capability to our soldiers. We must understand that we need to take advantage of what is currently in the commercial and academia sectors in all areas. And how do we leverage that so that we can rapidly deliver capability to our soldiers? My biggest fear at night when I think about the synthetic training environment, I don't want to get done, and I don't want to give the Army an iPhone 1. Because if we continue at the pace and what we do inside the Army, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And so my whole intent is to maximize and leverage the virtual and gaming industry, that is investing $5.2 billion and growing, which I can clearly see in this conference here, to take advantage of how do we change and innovate with our academia and our commercial industry partners. So, yeah.
That's very interesting. And so from a strategic perspective, Dr. Dale, any different thoughts? Or why does the Army all of a sudden want to innovate?
Cami, thank you very much for that. My thoughts are less different, I think, than complementary from a little bit of a different angle, which I hope is a theme that you'll hear across our panel through the course of this afternoon. Our Army knows that it needs to innovate. It has been a long time since the Army did a fundamental rethink. We came out of Vietnam, that was a tough experience. We rediscovered Europe. We did some hard rethinking at that point, including coming up with new ways to think about how we would fight if we had to. Did a lot of that with our United States Air Force. And we developed new and important weapon systems, and all of that was good. It was a big leap forward, but it was a long time ago and in a very different world. Well, more recently, of course, the Cold War ended, the Soviet Union fell apart, and in recent years, indeed for many years, our Army has been deeply immersed in Iraq and Afghanistan and Iraq again, in counterinsurgency fight that has absorbed almost all of our bandwidth. But meanwhile, the rest of the world has not been standing still. The geopolitical game has moved on and boldly and in striking new directions. Russia, the potential adversary that I know best as in the Soviet hand, has used military force to invade and occupy parts of neighboring states and try to change the global order. We watched China extending its tentacles of influence in all directions around the world, from telecommunications to setting up military outposts. This is a competition right now that the United States is not winning. Now, is that the Army's sole responsibility? Well, no, of course it isn't, but the Army has a critical and integral part of this picture. The Army is a core part of our overall joint military force mandated to protect and defend the nation. Last thing in the world we actually want to do is go fight a war, but that strength is essential to deterring our potential adversaries, to changing their calculus and making them think twice. That's really why we need an Army. So the Army wants to innovate right now, first of all, because we're behind and we need to catch up. Second, because technologically the pace of change is almost overwhelming. And third, and most importantly, because if we don't, the consequences could be more than serious.
I agree with all of that, and I think that really kind of helps complementary as a scientist. Dr. Sublime, what are your thoughts as it relates to why the Army all of a sudden wants to innovate?
I think my thoughts are complementary to everything that both of you have said, and that I would say that I don't think the Army suddenly has a desire to innovate. I'd say that we've always wanted to innovate, right? And it's just like you mentioned, I think we drove, the military as a whole, but the Army in particular, really drove a lot of the earlier innovation, like GPS and the internet. So I think with recognizing the pace at which technology is spreading and how it's drastically increased the rate of innovation, we need to more actively support innovation across the board, is what I'd say, and really strengthen our ties with academia, strengthen our ties with industry, to really get after higher impact solutions, but do that more rapidly, right? Because we want to be able to more rapidly respond to folks that are working against us, against our national interest. And you're right, I think our old ways of doing things, the 20-year-long projects, simply cannot continue.
So those are all very interesting thoughts, absolutely about innovate, but Well, a novel device is often described as an innovation in economics, management science, and other fields of practice and analysis. Innovation is generally considered to be the result of a process.
Challenge, and the one that kind of tends to capture our imaginations is need to close the gaps. The thing is, that's kind of our comfort zone, right? We're pretty darn good at improving on what we've got, pulling in the technologies that we need, at talking about equipment and producing it. And it's not that that's easy, but it's our comfort zone. The even harder challenge is what takes us to this whole issue of innovation and why we need it so desperately, because the real hard challenge is that the longer term mission of Army Futures Command is to make sure that the U.S. Army becomes a continually modernizing organization. And that requires innovation in at least 3 arenas. The first certainly is technological, right? Reaching out, as my friends and colleagues have been describing, to non-traditional communities. We are so lucky to be here today in Capital Factory. Like, what a great bridge to all kinds of potential partners who are essential to figure out what we can think about together and work on together. We've also been reaching out to all kinds of great university partnerships. You know, right here in town, we share a building with the University of Texas System. Actually got to see Chancellor Milliken earlier today. Also earlier today, got to see Chancellor Sharp from Texas A&M. Just a couple weeks ago, a great visit to Baylor University in Waco, exploring what we can work on together. Second arena in which innovation is absolutely necessary is, of course, organizational. It's less sexy, right? But it's that we cannot be linear and sequential, as my colleagues have been describing. We've got to do this faster and smarter. And the third arena, and the one perhaps closest to my own arena, is strategically we've also got to innovate, right? We've got to be able to think smart about the future security environment a year out, 5 years out, 10 years out. We've got great analytical tools for doing that. We need to apply them. I believe we also need to get creative and innovative with using tools that we're less comfortable with. So things like art and fiction. A good friend and colleague of mine, August Cole, who's one of the co-authors of the phenomenal novel Ghost Fleet, was here in town at South by the past days, and he calls it fiction intelligence, as a way of imagining a future that's beyond the boundaries we usually think in, and using that to challenge our own analysis and make it stronger. All of those tools are tantalizing. I think we need them, need to be innovating in all 3 of those areas.
So thank you for that. I actually had an opportunity to spend some time on Friday night with Dr. Dale and listening to her friend August Cole talk a lot about hackers. And so just the opportunity to bring that skill set into the federal government and the things that we're doing, particularly with the Army. But I'll pose the same question to you, Dr. Sablan. How do you think about innovation and opportunities?
So I think, I'm going to come at it from a scientist's perspective, right? And so I think innovation, first off, is recognizing the application of science, right? It's making that transition from basic research and the scientific developments to solutions that can solve near-term problems. It's a near-term focus when we're talking about innovation. So take collision avoidance, for example. I think we can all relate to that. We're using sensors to really perceive the environment, right? Is there an obstacle ahead? And how does the vehicle respond to that obstacle ahead, right? And wanting it to respond much faster than we could, okay? So the sensors have really been developed through the science, the proximity detection and what have you. But it's the innovation, I would say, is recognizing in this example that you can use the science to solve a problem or create new capabilities, right? In this case, we have automobiles with collision avoidance. Now, I think there are a lot of opportunities to innovate and do great science within the Army. And interestingly so, from basic research all the way to production, right, which makes it very exciting. The Army scientist, I will point out, has the ability to really create technologies and innovations that really minimize casualties and save lives, right? So from that perspective, think we ought to be getting paid as much as medical doctors do get paid, because we're we're out there saving lives, is what I would say. But yes, I do think there are lots of opportunities to do great science in the Army, and to really work with Army scientists across the board to innovate. And I mean, I've come through as a vet scientist in the Army, right? So I think it's been the highlight of my career. And there's the opportunities in science, but there's also the opportunities for personal growth, right? As you clearly see.
Major General Gervais, any different thoughts about innovation and opportunities?
Yes, I'm going to take
Are
it
you going
from-
to change my question?
Nope, I am not, but I'm going to take it from a different angle. Because I think it is a great question. And I mean, as Catherine Dale pointed out, I mean, we were in the largest reorganization in some time for the Army. And, you know, if you look at it, I mean, Army Futures Command has been stood up right here in Austin. And we have 8 cross-functional teams that have been stood up. The Army has now committed to 6 modernization priorities because, you know, what we had envisioned, today's battlefield and the gaps we have, but the future battlefield and what we must do. And so those 6 modernization priorities, we have the 8 cross-functional teams are lined up with each one of them. We have 2 cross-cutting cross-functional teams. Assured VNT, positional navigation and timing, and then the synthetic training environment. So that, you know, in itself says we are committed to changing how we actually address our, you know, deliver capability of our force. But to me, when I think about innovation, so number one, it takes risk. You have to be willing to take risk. And it's going to require the Army to move away from our traditional processes. Because quite frankly, we bake in time, money, schedule to mitigate any option of risk in our schedule. So we're gonna have to understand how do we take risk and manage it. It's gonna require us to change our risk-averse culture. I mean, we each and every program we have is finding a way to mitigate where we see risk in that process, which extends the timeline. I'm just going to say it's going to take courage. It's going to take courage to say we need to do this and it's okay to fail. Look, I wear this uniform, I've worn it for 31 years, and you know, we don't have a zero defect mentality, but quite frankly, we don't like to fail. I mean, we don't. But to innovate, you have to fail. You have to try early, often, and fail and learn. And then you have to remember that one person's failure is another project's success. And so part of what I think we need to do is we need to understand how do we need to change our process? How do we need to change to say, this is what I'm trying to achieve? And not give you a document that says, here, put the bolt on this side. Because quite frankly, I think there's two cultures that got to change. One inside the Army, because that's the way we're used to doing it. You know, I just wrote a 30-page statement of need. Yep. Okay, my CFT did, and then I go to SOCOM and I'm looking at a one-pager. I'm like, oh. Okay, did we give too much information? But I will also tell you one of the reasons we were driven to that 25, 30-page statement of need is because some of my industry partners kept coming back and saying, you're not giving us enough information, you're not giving us enough information. What we need to do is, I need to be able to describe what we're trying to achieve. And then allow our industry partners or our academia partners to say, let me tell you the different ways this problem can be solved. And then we judge that. Okay, that makes us very uncomfortable, and that makes some of our partners very uncomfortable. So we have to really get to a process where we're not trying to describe the requirement to the nth detail. I also think we have to get over, it wasn't invented here. Okay, because if it's not my project and I'm not invented, you know, so how do I leverage something that's being taken place over here? And I think to innovate, you have to put it in the hands of the soldier early and often, because it will be the soldier that tells you how best it needs to change. How does it need to be, or could it be used in a different way? And so, as I'm looking at this, I'm looking at ways, how do we increase the visibility on what is actually occurring out there? How do we do that so that everybody understands where, you know, a success in one area could be a success applied to another area, or a failure in another area could be successful in my area? We're challenged across the board to see that. And then I think we have to look at it, I mean, how do you get in on the cutting edge? And I'll describe it this way, the cutting edge of technology that's out there. For example, we're so used to going, okay, give me the cough drop and we'll figure out how to use it in the Army. No. While you're developing that cough drop, I would like to tell you, keep it that much as you're doing it for the commercial sector, and ours should be this much different. In the past, we came in and we said, we're the Army, we needed to do this, we're that much different. We've got to be on the cutting edge, and also that provides the opportunity for us to innovate as we're going forward. All right, you're going to tell me before.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Very good conversation. Very good. I'm excited about all that, and I'll tell you. So I spent about 18 years working for the federal government. In the last year, prior to coming to Army Futures Command, I worked in private industry for Deloitte, doing HR transformation, but for federal clients. So I know why I came to Army Futures Command. But I'm curious to hear from you, Dr. Sablon, as a senior civilian employee with a background in science of all things. I think a career field that's highly sought after in industry. Why would someone want to come and work for the Army when there's so many other options?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Good question.
I mean, I have to say, right, again, having been a bench scientist, you get to do science without distractions, right? So we, and I say we as in the Army, we want the scientists to focus on solving problems and not necessarily chasing after money. That being said, I mean, it's your own ambitions, right? And we tend to be, as scientists and engineers, very competitive. So we're going to go out there and we're going to, you know, compete for proposals. We're going to find money. But it's good, it's reassuring knowing that you don't necessarily have to spend your time doing that. Of course, right? There's no free lunch. So you need to have also ironclad reasoning for the work that you're doing, right? It has to benefit the soldier. But that's why you want to work for the Army anyways, right?
Sounds good. Major General Gervais, what about you, ma'am?
Yeah, so I think this is a really great question. And I think it links back to the question we just answered. It's about the opportunity that exists. Because joining Army Futures Command, you have the opportunity to work alongside some of the most premier experts. You know, one in their field, number two in industry, in academia, within our own government, and also with other countries. Additionally, you have the opportunity to make what I think is an immediate impact. You solve the toughest problems, and you get to make a difference in our Army, our nation, and then also our world. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples because, see, I actually had a STEM degree. However, you know, I didn't realize the opportunity for all of the internships that exist within the Army and what they get to work on. And so I'm going to give you these three examples. And actually, you know, there was some malice of thought put in when I said this was my former jobs. Army Environmental Commander, the Seaburn Commandant, Cadet Command. So all of those I can understand as we were trying to recruit what people thought about joining the Army. And so when I talk about an immediate impact to the world, so one of the labs and interns actually developed the mobile hydrolysis system that was used to destroy the bulk chemical agent from Syria. Okay, in the Pentagon, you know, when our country signs up and says we're going to do this, and you have less than 6 months to figure out how to do it. You know, one, without not breaking any of the international treaties, and then number two, from the science perspective. And you put it on one of our ships and you go out there and you're able to actually destroy that bulk chemical agent in less than 6 months. My gosh, what a phenomenal experience of being able to come in and do that. Now, for my environmental hat, as I took a look at it, I mean, leading edge research on projects for endangered species, contaminated cleanup, also cultural preservation. You know, look, I got to go up and see the leading edge research that was being conducted by the Army on the beluga whales and how they fed their young and how we did not impact the beluga whale up in the Eagle River Flats up in Alaska. And we did that because we needed to be able to train. The third one I will tell you is just the ability to come in and no kidding on the battlefield, to say we have a problem on the battlefield, and then be able to develop a capability quickly and get it out on that battlefield to save lives, like was done over and over again in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And it's the ability of bringing in a lot of young interns into all these different programs that we have, straight out of college, cutting their teeth on, no kidding, leading edge program. Now I will tell you, if I knew about all of this when I came in, I probably wouldn't be sitting up here talking to you today. Because I think the last point I would make is it's the opportunity, but number two, I had no idea the Army was going to invest in me as much as they have. And that will go across the board. You know, everything from your professional development to the projects that you work on and what you get to do. So, you know, you can talk to me afterwards. I love what I get to do, and I love the 30 years I've been in the military.
I can tell, it kind of comes across as you're talking, so it's really good information. Dr. Dale, and the same question for you, ma'am. Why?
Cammy, thanks for that. In all candor, I'd rather keep listening to both Dr. Savant and General Gervais, who are telling these great stories about the Army that I also know and love, but from a little bit of a different angle. You know, when I was thinking about this question, Cammy mentioned earlier, we had the privilege, both of us, of spending time here at South by the last few days with members of the hacker community. And I've got to say, this is all brand new to me, right? I just moved to Austin. This is my very first South by ever. This is quite something. I mean, any place with really stimulating, thought-provoking panels and live music, beer, and bowling on Sunday afternoon is a pretty damn good thing, so sign me up and let me stay. But these great hackers that we've been talking to, right, both friendly and maybe some of them not quite so much, we're describing, and this is the interesting part, what it is that gets them up in the morning, and it's the same theme for a lot of them. It is the genuine joy of solving really hard problems. As my friends and fellow panelists have been describing, the Army offers that opportunity. That's true organizationally, right? How do we speed up and get this right? It's true technologically. Oh my goodness, how do we get ahead and stay ahead of the curve in new ways? And it's also true in my own arena, the strategic arena. You know, our Army needs a view of what the global security environment is going to look like 5 years out, and 10 years out, and 20 years out. Let me just say, that is an art, not a science. It's not simply straight trajectories of military modernization by other leading global powers. It is economic trends and demographics and the environment and energy and grand geopolitics, and then find the right algorithm to meld those things together and think about the sum total and what it means for our Army. That is a wicked problem to try to solve, and it's a really, really good kind of challenge. It requires the very best intellectual firepower. If you are interested, I would also be happy to talk with you more. The one thing I'd add to that is that I think all of us hope that it's not just the opportunity to solve tough problems that would make the Army compelling for many people. It's the Army itself and what the Army is. And to get there, you kind of have to buy a fundamental argument. The argument is that the world is a tough place. There are other states out there that will challenge us and the current global order in their own interests, and interests that are not fully compatible with our own. That our national strength is key to keeping that in check, to changing the calculus of other potential global powers and making them think twice. And that our Army is a core part of that national strength. If you buy that and believe it, and I happen to, then it's pretty hard to imagine a more compelling reason to get up in the morning.
Interesting. And so we've talked a little bit about innovate, and we've talked about innovation and opportunities and why someone would want to come and work for the Army. And so Dr. Sablon, with the recent focus on STEM and innovate, again, as a scientist, how does the Army outreach to a vast pool of talent in the S&T community so that they truly understand, one, what the Army's mission is, and two, how they fit into that?
So we do that in two ways, let's say. One, where we bring talent into the lab through several mechanisms, so internship programs, fellowships, scholarship programs, and it spans from middle school all the way to graduate school students, and even opportunities for recent graduates with bachelor's and master's degrees to come into the labs, work alongside Army scientists and engineers, and really the only way to really understand the Army and the information space is to become immersed in what we do. So, and I think that's worked out really well. The second is we go where the talent is, right? So if they're not going to come to us, we're going to go find them. And we've stood up the open campus model, where we've opened our doors to really foster collaborations across the board and really facilitate personnel exchange, where our scientists have the opportunity to go work across various academic and industry labs, and likewise they have the opportunity to come work in our labs. But even beyond that, we've extended these campuses, right? We have these several hubs that have been stood up across the country to again tap into the brain power that's local to the area. And actually ARL South is co-located with UT Austin. So for those of you who might be interested in visiting, please speak to me after.
Very interesting, and that's one of the things that I think the Army Futures Command, being here in Austin, is going to have an opportunity to kind of make a tremendous footprint here. And it's going to cause us kind of some of the things that we've heard throughout the conversation, this non-traditional, complementary, and opportunity to think a little bit different about how we get to the talent that the Army Futures Command will need in our organizations to kind of help with what our the uniqueness is of this particular command and our mission moving forward. So with that, Dr. Dale, as a doctor, so you're a doctor. So trying to figure out how to word that. So you're a doctor, but you don't come from a STEM background, so to speak. But do you see opportunities in the Army for those with a broader national security background, or would you think, or would you say that you're probably an anomaly?
Tammy, thank you for that. I am probably an anomaly in a whole lot of ways. But the basic answer to your question is, absolutely there are opportunities in the Army and the national security world as well. And so with your indulgence, I will tell a short story. So it's 2001. And I am finishing up my dissertation in political science at the University of California, Berkeley. Go Bears. All right. All right. And at the same time, I am working in, at that point, in United Nations peacekeeping. It's a world I love very much. I was getting ready to transition on to a follow-on UN mission. But it's 2001, and 9/11 happens. So it was a really good time to look up at the U.S. government and the opportunities that might be available to come back and be part of the home team. To my absolute astonishment, at that point, the U.S. Army was looking for political advisors for its warfighting generals. And to my even greater astonishment, the U.S. Army hired me to be one of those political advisors. So all in a flash, I moved to Heidelberg, Germany, and went to work for U.S. Army 5th Corps. I thought that what we were going to be doing is peacekeeping in the Balkans, something that I knew about. But of course that wasn't the case. I got a knock on the door, I get a question, what do you know about Iraq? To which naturally I replied, not a damn thing. Have you read my resume? There is nothing in there about the Middle East. But that's of course what we were doing. We were off on a way to Baghdad for a year and a half that felt like a lifetime. It was not immediately obvious what an old Soviet hand was doing there, but there's a skill set that turned out to be really quite valuable, and it's the ability in a rigorous, academically trained way to look at the whole picture, the entire civil military effort, from the ground level up to the strategic level, how the pieces fit together or do not, and how they might need adjustment. And it turned out that that ability was in demand. In Baghdad, I was very often the only civilian in the room. I'm pretty darn sure I was the only Berkeley graduate in the room. By the way, if I ever write a memoir, it will be called From Berkeley to Baghdad. And boss, if you're listening, I'm not writing a memoir anytime soon. What was remarkable is that especially since then, the Army has sought out other people far more talented than I am, from Emma Skye and Sarah Chase to my dear friend Kim Field, who's in Afghanistan right now playing a similar kind of advisory role. It is not an easy role to play. It can be a hard sell. You certainly don't win always or maybe even often in an argument that you're making, but you are a welcome part of the team. The Army needs that kind of help. The appetite is real to help us challenge our assumptions and help us see ourselves. It's a good world to be in.
So, Major General Gervais, again, a very different background as well, though all three of you are complementary in a sense, but what can you share about your thoughts on how you've seen and envisioned innovation and STEM opportunities to support our soldiers?
Yeah, so, I'm going to start off and I'm going to have to tell a story too.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
I told Kim that she had no control once I got there.
No.
So, I think from the Army's perspective, we have so much opportunity. The challenge we have is that people do not know about that opportunity. And so with my time at Cadet Command, what I found through outreach in secondary schools and also in colleges is that we did not really articulate very well how a degree could be useful inside the Army. There is a stereotype out there that says you come in the Army, we're going to issue everybody a weapon, you're going to the front line, that's all we need. People don't fully understand that we are a business and we have lots of skill sets that are needed across the board. And so as I was working with a lot of colleges and universities, especially engineering departments, it was how do we conduct our outreach to soon-to-be graduates and get them to understand that, no kidding, you are going to work on tough problems. Your physics degree is going to help overcome something like hypersonics on that one. But bring it back a little personal though. Now, I mean, so our daughter, because my husband's sitting there, our daughter,
and he turned and looked back.
Yes, he looked back. I did notice that. So our daughter wanted to be a dentist. She had a very great experience with an Army orthodontist in Germany, and she's wanted to be a dentist since she was 16 years old. So she was in school at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, dental school, and so we asked some of her classmates to come down just so that we could show them the Pentagon Dental Clinic and they could talk to the dentist and the specialties and get some insights. So it was very interesting because, there was like 10 of them. And it was interesting walking around to hear the comments that they had. Things like, oh my gosh, you guys are using cutting edge technology that we talked about in school. You're doing this procedure. And it went on and on. And finally I turned around to them and I said, well, what did you think? We pulled teeth out with pliers? Because they didn't fully understand that they were going to have the opportunity, the care they could give, the technology they could use, and how it could guarantee a pathway to what it was that they wanted to achieve. So I think outreach is very key for what we need to do, and especially in Army Futures Command as we're talking about talent and how that degree and how that specialty could translate inside the Army. But going back now to innovation, that piece of it. So you've heard me talk about getting it in the hands of the soldiers, and I think the way you do that up front is you do experimentation, you do technology demonstrations, you do that early in the process and you do it often, not after the fact, because once you get the soldier in the process, you're you're really going to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve and how to solve it better. You know, because what we do a lot in the process is we define what we think the problem is. But the soldier's going to be the one on the ground that has to use it and will know the limitations of that piece of kit and will be the one asking and showing you how to make it better. So I think, you know, from that standpoint, I think, you know, we have a great opportunity as long as we clearly articulate the opportunities that exist within the Army.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is give you each an opportunity to sort of share 1 minute closing thoughts on this whole idea about innovating opportunities and from your perspective what all of that means to the Army, to Army Futures Command, just whatever it is that you'd like to share. But 1 minute.
Oh, you looked at me.
Yes, because if you take longer than a minute, that means that.
Okay, so the thing. I'm just going to go first because you're looking at me.
That's right.
So I will say, you know, the thing of all of this is that one, the Army is committed to changing. We've set up Army Futures Command. We know that we need your help, your assistance in doing this. So we look forward to partnering with you. Okay, I gave backwards.
Wow. So then we better go to Dr. Dale.
Awesome.
Closing
25
thoughts?
words or less?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Cam. Very much agree with Dr. Dale. The thing about this panel that was so tantalizing was the opportunity to be part of a panel with 3 other colleagues, all from Army Futures Command, playing leadership roles, but in really quite different ways. Army Futures Command needs innovation in all of these arenas. When I look out at this room, I also see really interesting mix of military and civilian, and I think folks from all kinds of different backgrounds and areas of expertise. It's an open invitation to an ongoing dialogue. AFC and the Army as a whole can't do this alone. Be part of this with us. Thank you.
Dr. Subrahman.
So short and sweet, I'll say I think innovating is really about combining people, the environment, and the tools. And as you clearly see, I mean, we want to strengthen our ties with academia and industry, and in particular the non-traditionals, right? So come to us with your ideas. Let's talk about your technologies, and let's see how we can work together.
Awesome. And so what I'd like to say is that, you know, we need to strive constantly and consistently in our roles to unify direction, galvanize activity through providing a meaningful framework to amplify some of our actions. This could be to raise awareness, to influence behavior, challenge biases, celebrate achievements, and challenge even stereotypes. So let's be deliberate in doing just that as we move forward and move forward with Army Futures Command. So I'd like to thank these ladies for their time, and then we'll open the floor up for questions. If you have questions, you can come up to the mics, just stand one behind the other, and we'll take questions.
So I heard this statement many times. It said the brightest minds of our the brightest minds of our generation are looking at problems such as making people click ads. Obviously today I think this is not true. There's really brilliant people working on very different problems like you are. Well, what do you say to that? And you know, is that the case? Is that not the case? Is that a good thing, a bad thing?
So any one of the panels in particular?
So we're trying to understand.
Sorry, English is not my native language. I'm Spanish, but they say the brightest minds of our generation are focused on problems such as making people click ads. What do you think about that? Click ads, like making people click on advertising. That's like
so like what social, like what Facebook does when they
Facebook,
have
Google,
ads,
you name it.
So let me explain for the
sorry.
generation.
Sorry, I'm not good at language yet. I'm working on this.
You're fine. You're fine, ladies.
So I think, although the brightest minds are working on those, I will say that that translates into some of the needs that we have within the Army also. You know, for example, I have the synthetic training environment, which is we're looking at how do we use things like virtual gaming opportunities to better train our soldiers. And so if you look at where the brightest minds are right now in the gaming industry, they're creating the games, but they're the same folks that we need helping us, you know, with overcoming some of the scalability issues, challenges we will have because we need more people on a game. We need it physics-based. We also need the assistance with how do we bring in the terrain, the 3D simulation terrain. And what we're finding is that as we're articulating what it is that we want to achieve, we're getting the brightest minds that are helping us with that.
Good. Any other questions?
So, ladies, you talked a lot about risk and how difficult change is in the Army as an institution. So, as leaders and as role models, how do you intend to promote and incentivize risk so that that is rewarded and that people don't stay the course because that's what's comfortable and instead embrace failure as a catapult to success?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I will say, you know, our culture right now is one of our biggest limiting factors. However, the fact that, you know, our leadership has dedicated, you know, said we have 6 modernization priorities, have formed 8 cross-functional teams. Those priorities now we're aligning resources on it. And then the other piece that I found was, as what you find is that when you have somebody that comes to the table and they have a very innovative way to do something, as a leader, you let that, you know, occur, and then you incentivize that, because what that does is now everybody said, oh, this is moving forward. You know, we have a vision, but the vision's big. So what we're doing is small incremental progress along the way, and what we're doing is we're showing that, and then when you start to get the rest of the Army to buy in, what I'm finding is everybody else wants to be part of that. You know, and just to put it in context, we started with a little bit of money 2.5 years ago, maybe a little more because I'm almost at my 3-year mark. A little bit of money with an idea. And I will say that you can't talk about it on a PowerPoint slide, you can't talk about it in concept or theory. What you have to do is you have to get a prototype. And you get the prototype and then you start playing around with it. It shows the gaps, it shows the potential, and then you bring, you know, we brought senior leaders in and said, look at this 3D terrain, how we're able to do this, and here's what we're going to be able to do with it. Then we started getting advocacy. Then we started getting a seat at the table to discuss it. And right now, the momentum we have is unbelievable as we're going through this. And so what we've done is in small little steps, showing that we've taken the risk is paid off. But at the same time, there's been a couple other areas where the risk didn't quite pay off. And instead of, you know, shutting everybody down, what we said was, you know, that was a good attempt, here's what we learned from it, here's how we're going to do it differently, and we moved on. And what I'm starting to see is that people are starting to open their minds and wanting to be part of the team. And, you know, it takes time. It takes time. Tactical patience, and that's something we don't have inside the Army. Tactical patience. And so that's what we're seeing. And that's why I brought up risk, because we're going to have to take risk.
I'm a very bad poker player. I'd love to build on that in just a word and actually make the problem harder. Because there's a danger that otherwise this sounds like we are all so fired up about what we get to do at Army Futures Command and for the Army. We see real possibility ahead. Like this thing actually could work. But it is a great point that there are all sorts of ways that this can go horribly wrong. And one of those you pointed to, right? We are going to have to get comfortable with something we're profoundly uncomfortable with, which is a little bit of failure. We've got leadership top cover, it's rock solid. That is the guidance. You do not yet have a rich storehouse of examples of failure and having that be okay. It's all about the incentive structure. What are the criteria for promotion, for further assignments, for the ability to participate in conversation, for getting more money? Some of that is within the purview of Army Futures Command itself. We can set those conditions. Some of it is big Army, including the whole talent management world that Candy is helping lead as we go forward. And some of it is way outside of all of this. It's on Capitol Hill. And we are, at the end of the day, accountable to the American taxpayers. That's a very serious trust. And when accountability is necessary. So we've got to have a conversation that says the responsible thing to do so that we can modernize as an Army and help protect and defend the nation includes assuming a little bit more calculated risk up front with some bounded failures so that we can move forward in bigger and bolder ways. So thanks for raising that.
To a good point, and just to some of the things that you touched on as it relates to failure and being okay with failure. You know, I tell people all the time, the only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. And so I think you have to be mindful of that because to be successful in everything that we do, again, fail often, and be comfortable with failure, creating an environment that allows people to be comfortable to fail so that they can help us realize the things that we need to realize as we forge the future here at Army Futures. Any other questions?
So I have one for you, Catherine. So I think it was really great to have that conversation about risk, right? And as you talked about incremental change, but the one thing that you brought up earlier when you talked about you got to see the hackers, right? You got to see things that were different. We talked about the speed of technology and globalization bringing the world closer together. Therefore, other things becoming closer together, right? So one of the things that my hope for Army Futures Command as we move forward, and I would love to hear your perspective, is that there are things that could fundamentally change how we fight. Right? We talk about building lethality in our lethality doesn't necessarily mean tank on tank anymore, right? So from your perspective, how do you see our ability to see ourselves and that opportunity that fundamentally changes how we fight?
Reimagining.
Thank you for that excellent question. Over a coffee or something stronger a little bit later, I would love to hear your own answers. It's really hard to see yourself. And it's really hard to make sure that you are changing not just as one great leap forward, that's hard enough, but to make sure that you're doing it on a continual basis. So, as you know, we have just released a new concept, sort of our way of thinking about how we will fight multi-domain operations. It's version 1.5. It's a very smart reimagining, including with other military services, about what the future fight will look like. It's got a bunch of great instincts that whatever that fight would look like, it's going to be across domains, space and cyber, as well as air, land, and sea, that it's all going to be a lot more creative in the mix than perhaps it has been in the past, that we're going to need to both organize and train and equip and prepare in different ways. All of that is probably basically right into the future. We need, but that's pretty broad, right? We need to continue to think about things that could be quite different from what the fight has looked and felt like in the past. When I look at our adversaries, the one that I know best is Russia. Russia is determined to change the global order of things. They're fundamentally dissatisfied. They are not going to take on a fight that they know they will lose. may not going to find us in a large-scale conventional anything and watch all of their forces be attrited, only to lose at the end of the day. They are relatively unconstrained in the application of other tools. We see that already. And we should anticipate that they will challenge us in increasingly difficult to see, difficult to prevent, let alone deter ways that may not look like anything we're currently anticipating. That's why, and thank you for the opportunity for the repeat plug, I think we need some creative injects, right? Not just our ground up analysis, which is awesome, everything we can see and put together, but genuinely creative outside thinkers in the world of fiction, in the world of art and film and other arenas to help us imagine things that could be fundamentally different. But there are things about the fundamental nature of warfare that don't change the soldier's experience in some very, very basic ways. But what this actually looks like could be radically different from anything we've known. And it is a great spur that we keep up and never get complacent.
I think one thing we have to think about as we're moving forward is, so how do we actually use all of this rich data that is out there? So right now, we have data that we do not even tap into right now. And as we're moving forward, how do you take data that comes from the training environment, the testing environment, the experimentation, and even operationally, and how do we close that loop? Right now, a lot of our lessons learned are, captured, comes back into our Center for Army's lessons learned. We have, I think General Perkins' comment used to always be, we are resource-rich, knowledge-poor, because we have so much there, but we don't have a way to actually tap in and use it. So in the future, how do we take these environments, this data, and use it to inform and address and have the soldiers helping us in this entire process? I think that is one area where we can definitely get better, and we've had lots of panels and discussions on the use of AI, machine learning, and the piece. So, but how do we take advantage of all the data that is out there? So we don't keep relearning the same lessons. So maybe the lessons are sort of.
So hopefully that answers your question, and I think what we'll do is we are out of time, and so we'll close with that, and I'll just say to you all, with the things that the panel has discussed, again, just reimagine and then imagine the possibilities with Army Futures. So thank you.
Exactly, that's what I'm like, God, look
Okay.